I've always believed that peace is something you earn, not something that simply happens to you. For years, I worked to build a life that felt safe, steady, and full of love, a life far removed from the chaos that once shaped me. My name is Ethan Ramirez, and I wear a police badge in the small town of Harlow, Nebraska, where the wind rolls over golden plains and neighbors wave from their porches. To outsiders, Harlow seems like a postcard, a place where children ride their bikes down quiet streets, and the biggest excitement is the annual Harvest Fair. But beneath every calm surface, there's a current of stories, some tender, some painful, and some that never really fade. Every morning, I wake before dawn. The smell of coffee fills the kitchen as sunlight creeps across the windows. My wife, Sophia, always greets me with that sleepy smile that makes me feel grounded. Our daughter, Lily, is 4 years old and the heartbeat of our home. Her laughter dances through every room, and her curiosity keeps our days bright. She's the reason I breathe easier, the reason I remind myself that good things can grow even in the soil of a broken past. Most mornings, after breakfast, I walk Lily to preschool. She chatters the whole way, about butterflies, clouds shaped like dragons, and the storybooks we read the night before. Her hand fits perfectly in mine, and in those few blocks, the world feels right. By the time I drop her off and head to the station, I've already won the day, but even in the comfort of that routine, a shadow sometimes lingers. It hides behind the smiles, a whisper from a time I've tried to bury. My past isn't something I talk about. Not with my colleagues, not even with Sophia. But every so often, when the wind howls late at night, or a sudden noise echoes in the quiet, I'm pulled back, to the house I grew up in, to the sound of my father's voice when it turned from calm to thunder. My father, Victor Ramirez, was a man people respected and feared in equal measure. He worked hard, but he ruled harder. My mother, Elena, was his opposite, a soft-spoken woman with eyes that carried both love and sorrow. She was the kind of person who made even silence feel warm. Yet, I can still remember the nights when that warmth disappeared, replaced by tension, so thick you could almost taste it in the air. I was 10 when I first realized something was wrong, really wrong. I remember sitting in my room, hugging my knees as voices rose from the living room. Then came the crash of something breaking, my mother's muffled sob, and my father's anger cutting through the air like a blade. Those nights shaped me. I'd lie there wishing for the courage to step in, to stop him. But I was just a scared kid, helpless and small. The next morning, my mother would put on her smile, cook breakfast, and act as though the night before had never happened. I used to ask her why she stayed. She'd just say, because families stick together, Ethan. Even then, I knew she was lying, to herself, maybe more than to me. By the time I turned 17, I wasn't the same timid boy anymore. I'd grown taller, stronger, and angrier. I'd also grown tired of watching my mother suffer in silence. One night, when my father came home after too much to drink and started shouting about dinner being late, something in me snapped. I remember stepping between them, heart pounding, telling him to stop. The look on his face when I spoke up, surprise turning to rage, was something I'll never forget. He shoved me so hard I hit the wall, the pain searing through my shoulder. "You think you're a man now," he sneered. "You're just as weak as your mother." Those words burned into me. But they also lit a fire I've never let go of. That night, I promised myself that one day, I'd dedicate my life to protecting people like her, the ones who couldn't fight back. That promise is what led me into law enforcement. And while my father called it a fool's job, I knew it was my purpose. I left home soon after, keeping contact only with my mother. I'd visit her quietly when I could, always when my father wasn't around. I begged her to leave him, but she never did. "He's still your father," she'd say softly. And one day, he'll change. That day never came, years passed. I built my life in Harlow. I married Sophia, the most compassionate woman I've ever known, and together we brought Lily into the world. With them, I learned what love really meant. Still, I couldn't shake the occasional guilt that I'd escaped while my mother stayed behind. I'd send her money, call her often, and she'd always sound fine. But there was something in her voice, a tiredness she couldn't hide. One evening, after a long shift at the station, I sat on the porch watching the storm clouds roll in. The sky turned the color of steel, and the wind carried that electric scent that comes before heavy rain. Inside, Sophia was putting Lily to bed, humming softly. The moment felt peaceful, like every other night. But peace can shatter in a heartbeat. It started with a knock. Not the casual kind, but desperate, frantic. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and my instincts kicked in immediately. I grabbed my pistol from the table, approached the door, and called out, "Who's there?" Through the rain, I heard it. A voice I hadn't heard in months, trembling and weak. "Ethan, it's me." I froze. That voice belonged to my mother. I threw open the door. There she was, soaked to the bone, her face pale and streaked with rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, frail. Her clothes clung to her, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Mom?" I caught her just before she collapsed into my arms. She was shaking uncontrollably. I carried her inside, laying her gently on the couch. Sophia came running down the stairs in her robe, eyes widening in shock. Together, we wrapped my mother in blankets, trying to warm her up. She clung to my hand as she whispered, He did it again, Ethan. He threw me out." My stomach tightened. I didn't need to ask who he was. Between sobs, she told me everything. My father, Victor, had found himself a new companion, Brooke, a woman half his age, charming in all the wrong ways. Rumor had it she'd been pushing him to sell the house and transfer the land to her. When my mother refused to sign the papers, his temper exploded. "He said he doesn't need me anymore," she cried softly. "He told me I was in the way." Sophia sat beside her, holding her hand. "You're safe here," she said gently. "We'll take care of you." I couldn't speak. My chest burned with anger and helplessness. All those years, I had hoped he might mellow with age. Instead, he had become worse. That night, after my mother finally drifted into uneasy sleep in our guest room, I sat awake in the living room, watching the rain batter the windows. I could still hear the storm in her voice, the tremble of decades of fear. My hands clenched around my coffee cup. I'd seen countless victims of domestic cruelty in my career, but hearing it from my own mother, it felt like the past had found its way back to my doorstep. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still grey. Sophia helped my mother dress in clean clothes, her kindness wrapping around her like a shield. Lily peeked from behind the kitchen door, her eyes wide. "Is Grandma okay?" she asked. My mother smiled weakly and opened her arms. Lily ran to her without hesitation. For the first time since that night, I saw a flicker of peace in my mother's eyes. After breakfast, I drove her to the hospital. My friend, Dr. Emily Hayes, examined her carefully. When she came out of the room, her face was grave. "Ethan, she's been hurt before, hasn't she?" I nodded silently. "These aren't new injuries," she said softly. "This is long-term trauma. You need to report it." I swallowed hard. "I will." When I told my mother we needed to file a report, she hesitated. "People will talk," she whispered. "They'll say I'm tearing the family apart." I took her hand. "Mom, you didn't destroy anything." "He did. You've been living in fear for too long." Let me help you. Her eyes filled with tears. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she nodded. Okay, Ethan. I trust you. That was all I needed. I drove to the old family home later that afternoon. The sight of it hit me like a wave. The porch was sagging, the paint peeling, the yard overgrown. But what hurt most was the smell when I stepped inside, stale beer and smoke. My father was sitting in his chair, a bottle in hand. Beside him, Brooke lounged carelessly, her smile smug. Well, if it isn't Officer Perfect, my father sneered. Come to arrest me, son. I came to tell you it's over, I said firmly. You can't hurt her anymore. He stood, his eyes cold. You think you can tell me what to do? You're still that scared kid who ran away. I'm not scared anymore, I said quietly. He moved closer, his breath sharp with alcohol. Get out of my house. Then, just like before, his hand struck my shoulder, not a punch this time, but a shove full of bitterness. I didn't react. I just looked at him, really looked. The man who once seemed so powerful now looked small, empty. Goodbye, Dad, I said and turned to leave. Driving home, I felt both fury and sorrow tearing inside me. But when I stepped into our house and saw my mother laughing softly as Lily showed her a drawing, the storm inside me calmed. That night, as the 3 generations of our family sat together around the dinner table, something shifted. For the first time, my mother looked at peace. I knew then what had to come next: justice. I gathered everything I could: medical reports, statements from neighbors who'd heard arguments, evidence of financial manipulation. Each piece hurt to collect, but it was necessary. With the help of my old college friend, Marcus Hale, now a lawyer in Lincoln, we started preparing the case. It wouldn't be easy, and my father would fight it every step of the way. The morning of the court hearing arrived like a storm disguised as sunlight. Harlow's County Courthouse stood proud and solemn, its brick walls catching the early rays of dawn as if bracing for what was to come. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and glanced at my mother beside me. She looked smaller than ever, her frail hands clutching a folded tissue, but her eyes, those same eyes that once looked down at me with fear, now held a quiet strength. Are you ready, Mom? I asked softly. She nodded. I've been ready for years, Ethan. I just didn't know how to say it. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Familiar faces from town sat in the benches, whispering stories they thought they knew. The sight made my stomach tighten. In small towns, gossip spreads faster than truth. But today wasn't about them. It was about my mother, about giving her the voice she'd been denied for so long. Marcus Hale, our attorney, greeted us at the table with a calm smile. We have everything we need. Just stay composed. He turned to my mother. You're the truth in this room, Elena. Don't let him take that from you again. When Victor entered, the air changed. He walked in like he still owned the world, dressed sharply, but with a hollow arrogance that didn't fit him anymore. His eyes met mine briefly, cold and hard, before sliding to my mother. You really want to do this? He muttered loud enough for us to hear. After everything? My mother didn't reply. She simply straightened her back, lifted her chin, and faced forward. That quiet defiance was louder than any shout. The hearing began. Marcus presented our evidence, photos of injuries, the medical reports Dr. Hayes had prepared, and statements from neighbors who had heard years of shouting and crashes through thin walls. Every detail felt like reopening an old wound, but each one brought light into the darkness my father had built around us. Victor's lawyer, Derek Voss, was as slippery as they came. He painted my mother as emotionally unstable, accused me of using police influence to fabricate evidence. At one point, he even implied my mother's injuries were self-inflicted for attention. The words made my blood boil. I gripped the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. But Marcus's calm voice anchored me. "We don't argue with shadows," he whispered. Then came the moment that broke and rebuilt me all at once, my mother's testimony. She stood, walked slowly to the stand, and swore the oath with trembling fingers. For a moment, she was silent. Then she began to speak. She didn't cry. Her voice was steady, fragile at first, then gaining strength with each sentence. She talked about the early days of their marriage, the charm that masked control, the slow erosion of her confidence. She spoke of nights when silence was safer than truth, mornings when she pretended everything was fine for my sake. She looked at Victor and said, "You taught me to fear, but my son taught me to be brave." Even the judge leaned forward. You could feel the weight of every word. When Victor took the stand, his mask slipped. His voice rose, his temper flared, and the calm courtroom became a battlefield of old wounds. "She's lying," he shouted. "She always needed someone to blame." But his anger only confirmed everything my mother had said. The truth was undeniable now, written in his every movement. By the time the judge announced the verdict, voiding the coercive contracts, granting my mother half the assets, and issuing a restraining order, the courtroom was silent. My father's face twisted in disbelief. "This is injustice," he roared, slamming his hand on the table. Officers moved in quickly, guiding him out as his curses echoed behind him. Outside, sunlight poured over the courthouse steps. My mother took a long breath, her shoulders trembling with release. "It's over," she whispered. I smiled through the sting of tears. "No, Mom. It's just beginning." For the first time in decades, she was free. The weeks that followed were like learning to breathe again. My mother moved in with us permanently, settling into the rhythm of our family life on Willow Street. Sophia treated her like her own mother, and Lily adored her company. I often came home to find them in the garden, Lily chasing butterflies while my mother watered the flowers, her laughter light and new. Healing came slowly, but it came. There were mornings when I'd see her staring at the horizon, lost in thought. I never interrupted those moments. I knew she was making peace with the years she'd lost. Meanwhile, news about my father spread through Harlow. His reputation crumbled. Brooke, the woman he had left my mother for, disappeared from town not long after. Rumor had it she'd run off with another man, leaving Victor alone in the decaying house that had once been our home. I told myself I didn't care, but late at night, I found myself wondering how a man could destroy everything and still look at himself in the mirror. Months passed. I poured myself into my work, finding new meaning in every case that crossed my desk. Whenever I helped someone escape a situation that reminded me of my mother's, it felt personal. Justice had become more than my job, it was my redemption. Then, one evening, as summer faded into autumn, I got a call that shattered the fragile calm. There had been an incident at a local apartment complex, a woman found lifeless, signs of violence, and a witness who had seen Victor nearby. My stomach sank. Brooke's name was mentioned, the world seemed to tilt. Duty demanded I stay strong, but when the cell door closed behind him, I stepped outside and let the night air wash over me. The man inside wasn't the father I had needed, he was the man I had escaped becoming. Days later, my mother asked to visit him. Not to forgive him, she said. To finish what he started. I drove her to the county jail in silence. Inside, the air was heavy and cold. Victor sat on the other side of the glass, older now, his arrogance gone. When he saw her, he smirked faintly. You came to gloat. She shook her head. No. I came to tell you that you no longer have power over me. You broke everything we built, but you can't break what I've rebuilt, with love, with my son, with peace. For the first time, Victor didn't have a response. His eyes darted away. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was realization. But I knew, deep down, it didn't matter anymore. When we left, my mother didn't cry. She just looked at the sky and whispered, "I'm free." Life slowly returned to normal. Or maybe, for the first time, we were truly living it. My mother found joy in little things, baking apple pies with Sophia, helping Lily plant sunflowers, humming while folding laundry. I often caught her smiling for no reason, as though rediscovering herself piece by piece. One weekend, we visited a field on the edge of town, a place she used to take me when things at home were bad. The tall grass swayed in the breeze, and the air smelled of rain and earth. Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing across the open sky. My mother sat beside me on a blanket, her hands resting calmly in her lap. "I used to dream about this, Ethan," she said softly. "A day where I could breathe without fear." I looked at her and smiled. "You made it happen, Mom. You were brave enough to start over." She squeezed my hand. "No. You gave me the courage to believe I could." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and pink, I thought about everything we'd endured. The fear, the pain, the years of silence, all of it had led us here, to this moment of peace. I realized then that breaking the cycle wasn't just about standing against violence or injustice. It was about choosing love over bitterness, compassion over revenge, healing over hate. When Lily ran back and climbed into my lap, I wrapped my arms around her and whispered a silent promise. That she would never know the fear I once did. That she would grow up learning that strength isn't in how loud you shout, but in how gently you choose to stand. As the sun set over Harlow, I watched the woman who had once been my mother's shadow laugh freely beside my wife and daughter. And for the first time, I felt certain that the past no longer owned us. We had faced the darkness, and we had won.